my core limiting belief that I've been dealing with is that there will not be enough. It's not there's not enough now. It's that there will not be enough in the future. Now, I have no evidence that this is true. In fact, I have volumes of evidence that it is not true, but that doesn't seem to matter to my mind. Now, this is primarily about there will not be enough about money. Sometimes it's about time, but I realized, oh shit, I have resentments against my dad regarding money. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, where I help people heal their emotional, psychological, and spiritual wounds and make deep, lasting changes in their lives. I'm a boundaries coach who specializes in helping women who say yes when they really want to say no, and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on others. I've coached hundreds of people to create Boundaries by Design, a blueprint for life. I have a free boundary building starter kit at boundariesstarterkit.com. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any 12-step fellowship. I don't believe that 12-step recovery is the only way to recover. You might need additional help. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially the Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold, and I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. My hope is that you'll find my words concretely helpful in improving your life, whether you're in recovery or not. If you like what you've heard on this episode, please screenshot it and share it on your social media. Be sure to tag me at Higher Power Coaching. This is episode 292, Rediscovering Love for My Father, a Journey Through Resentment and Healing. Since the last episode, 291, where I shared about finding my inner teen's voice and learning to say no, there have been a bunch more things that have happened in my reparenting journey, so I'm going to share those. If you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to do that before proceeding because this will probably make a lot more sense. But before I get into that, recently I've been following a guy named David Bear. He has a podcast called A Changed Mind and a book by that same name. I highly recommend both. And David has influenced me greatly. I've listened to every episode of his podcast, and I listened to his book 3 times in a row recently. David got his start in the whole world of personal development in 12-step recovery, and it's kind of apparent if you listen to him and pay attention to him. And one of the many, many pieces of wisdom that he shares about limiting beliefs is that when we have a core limiting belief that we just can't seem to let go of, no matter how many tools we use, and he provides a lot of tools for that, which I have used, it's often because that belief is connected to a person, and specifically, it may be connected to a resentment with that person. And when I heard that, I was like, oh shit, I think he's talking to me. So my core limiting belief that I've been dealing with is that there will not be enough. It's not there's not enough now. It's that there will not be enough in the future. Now, I have no evidence that this is true. In fact, I have volumes of evidence that it is not true, but that doesn't seem to matter to my mind. Now, this is primarily about there will not be enough about money. Sometimes it's about time, but I realized, oh shit, I have resentments against my dad regarding money. So here's what I mean. The way I explain how things played out after my parents divorced when I was like 18 or 19 is that my mom sat on the couch and did crossword puzzles and watched Murder, She Wrote, and my dad traveled the world. Now, he didn't just travel the world. He had a job. But he took vacations around the country and around the world, which was not something we ever did as a family. In my family, when we went on a vacation, it was to visit family members, and we stayed for free at their houses. There was no traveling to Crete or Hawaii or South Dakota. We just didn't do that kind of stuff. So I had a resentment against my father about money because of this. I had always thought of my parents like he was the bad parent and my mom was the good parent. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that in the last couple of years, I've actually transformed my relationship with my deceased father. And he's become an inner loving dad, which has been really incredible to make that shift. It's been so, so healing. Well, the day after I heard David say this on his podcast about resentment potentially being the thing that's anchoring this limiting belief, I decided to do a fourth step resentment inventory as described in AA literature. And I wrote out all these different things that came up. And they've probably come up before because I've done the steps many times. And then after I did it, I also did a forgiveness inventory. And it was really powerful. Now, one of the things that came out of this is that I realized I had portrayed my mom as the victim and my dad as the victor, like she got abandoned and he left her with nothing, which he didn't. I mean, she got the house, and I honestly don't know the details of their divorce agreement. But I always looked at it like she got shafted, especially after he started traveling so much. And I somehow concluded that being poor means being ethical, like my mom, and having money means being unethical, like my dad. So my mom is ethical and poor, and my dad is unethical. And he wasn't rich, but by comparison, he was. When this came up, I was like, holy shit, this is huge. This is a belief that I thought I had dealt with way in the past. I do not intellectually believe that somehow rich people are bad. When this came up that weekend, I decided to list out the wealthy people that I've known over the years, and every fucking one of them is an amazing human being. So I don't have any actual evidence from my own personal life that rich people are assholes. It's a stereotype in our culture. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't any rich people like that. Of course there are. But there are also poor people who are fucking assholes. So, as part of my forgiveness inventory, I wrote a letter from my dad to me. And one of the things he said to me was, I was so fractured inside that I put up facades on the outside. And that's why I cared so much what others thought. I needed their reflection back to me to be good because I didn't feel good inside. And I thought that material wealth was the way to project a good image. That's what I wanted reflected back to me was goodness. I was not a good husband or father, and that was about me, not about any of you kids or your mom. So I did all of that inventorying and stuff on a Saturday. And the next morning, I woke up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and had this huge realization that my real big resentment was that my dad abandoned my family when he opened up Nangle's Pharmacy when I was 8 years old. When he opened up the store, he started working 7 days a week and was basically just not part of the family after that. Now, my whole life, I have always believed that there was never a time that I actually liked or loved my father. What happened that morning after I had this realization about this was the big resentment is that I had this memory of being pretty little, like maybe 5, and climbing into my parents' bed. My mom was on her side and my dad wasn't there, and I buried my face in my dad's pillow to get the scent of him. And when I had this memory, a very brief moment, I got a whiff of what my dad smelled like, what my dad's pillow smelled like. And I was like, oh my God, I loved my father. Holy shit. I didn't remember that I loved my father until I smelled that smell. And then this all started to make sense because my anger and resentment against my dad was covering up the pain of missing him because I actually loved my father. Now, in the last episode, you'll recall that one of the big changes that happened for my inner teenager was that she became willing to let go of the control she had been exerting over certain areas of my life that are not serving me currently because she felt loved and accepted in the inner family. So what I take this to mean is that her realization of being loved in my inner family and her declaration that she was going to stop doing these controlling behaviors because of that love sort of planted a seed of love in my inner family, which allowed me to let in the fact that I actually did love my dad. It allowed me to open up my consciousness to this fact through this memory of putting my face in my dad's pillow. Now, I know that I'm describing all of this using words to you, but I cannot tell you how powerful this stuff is. I'm still integrating the meaning of this after all of these decades of believing that I never loved my dad. So, after this realization that I actually did love my dad, I connected with my inner loving dad, and he said to me that it never occurred to him the emotional impact that opening the pharmacy would have on the family. He said he was really clear that it was pretty self-serving of him to open the store because he wanted to prove that he could do it, and also he fucking hated working for other people. He wanted to do it for himself, and he didn't really consider the impact on the family, and especially not the emotional impact. And then he said to me, what I'm realizing right now, Barb, is that another reason I opened the store and started working 7 days a week was because I wanted to be away from the family because I didn't want to taint you all. Now, I shared that the other day with someone and she said, what does that mean? And I said, well, I took that to mean that he was kind of a shady, self-centered guy who cheated on his wife, and he didn't want that kind of influence on us, which he would have had if he was around more. I truly believe in the core of my being that in the moment when I had that exchange with my dad, my Father in heaven had that same realization at that very moment when he and I were having that exchange. He realized he didn't want to taint the family. And he didn't realize that there was a part of him that was doing that. Now, this knowledge that I actually did love my father is changing me. I've got 61 years of belief about not ever liking and loving my father to undo. And what's happened in the last couple of weeks since I've had this realization is that I've had more and more reparenting episodes where he's really, really super loving to me, and I receive it. Because even though I have felt somewhat loving towards him in the last couple of years and have considered him my inner loving dad, he still looks like the dad that I always thought was an asshole. So there's been a part of me that's been a bit trepidatious about him. And what happened recently in one of my reparenting episodes is that my inner teenager, who always had way more difficulty with my father than my younger parts ever did, literally sat on my father's lap and buried her head in her shoulder and was held by him while she sobbed. Now, that is not something that would ever have happened in real life. My father was not someone I ever went to when I was upset. He was the kind of father that if you got hurt and you went to him, he yelled at you for getting hurt. So there's no way that I would ever have been emotionally vulnerable like that with my dad. So this has been an enormous and absolute relief to experience. So that is what I have been experiencing in the last couple of weeks, on top of trying to live my adult life in the outside world. You're feeling overwhelmed because you're overcommitted and just can't keep up. You neglect yourself even though you know you should take better care of yourself, but you just don't have the time. You really want to say no, but just can't get yourself to do it because you don't want to come across as selfish or unhelpful. And you're pretending things are okay with you when they're really not. If this is you, we should talk. Go to barbchat.net and sign up for a free 30-minute call with me about my private coaching. This is for people who are finally ready to make deep, lasting changes in their lives, their relationship patterns, including their relationships with themselves, their partners, family, friends, and colleagues. That's barbchat.net. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did because you're still listening, you will also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has short essays similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. If you haven't already subscribed to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet, please do that. It helps carry the message to more people. I started this podcast because there was so much wisdom in recovery that just wasn't making its way out into the world. So I want as many people as possible to hear it. I'd also love it if you'd leave a 5-star rating or a review, which you can do on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find it so they can get the benefits that you've gotten from listening. If someone in particular came to mind when you listen to this episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run private and group coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. I also do short-term situational coaching to help people make it through specific situations they're going through, such as divorce, empty nesting, preparing for retirement, or any phase where their identity is shifting. Regardless of the type of coaching, my ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I'd love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.